Hello and welcome to Austin Anderson Sports Talk College Football Playoff Edition. Now the craziness that we were promised with the College Football Playoff absolutely came true. The fog now has cleared, the mayhem has settled down for the time being, and we have our four teams, those being number 1 Alabama, number 2 Oregon, number 3 Florida State, and number 4 Ohio State. But did the committee get it right? Well, that's what we're going to dig deeper into and find out on this edition of Austin Anderson Sports Talk. At number 1, it's a clear cut for me. Of course, it has to be Nick Saban and his Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, they have 5 wins over ranked opponents this year and gave up the 4th fewest points in college football. And second is another clear-cut team, the Oregon Ducks, with Marcus Mariota, the Heisman frontrunner. This team averaged 46.3 points a game, 3rd in college football. Mariota had 38 touchdown passes, 2 interceptions, and 14 rushing touchdowns. Now, I'm not very good at math, but that's 52 total touchdowns to go with 2 interceptions. That is ridiculous. And third is Florida State. Now, they do not have the impressive victories and dominant performances of the other college football playoff teams. But they do have one small statistic that goes above and beyond the other 3 teams. They haven't lost a football game. And in 4th, the committee has Ohio State, but that is where the controversy starts to arise. Coming into the week, it looked like this. TCU, Texas Christian University, had the number 3 spot. Number 3. 4th was Florida State, 5th Ohio State, and 6th Baylor. But previously in the season, Baylor had beaten TCU 61-58. And if you're taking head-to-head into account, which you should, and which the committee did, you have to put Baylor ahead of TCU. So unfortunately for TCU, that drops them out of contention for a top 4 spot in my eyes. And that brings it to this: Ohio State versus Baylor. Both teams have just 1 loss on the season. Ohio State's was week 2 early against Virginia Tech, a 6-6 team. Baylor's was middle to end of the season against West Virginia, a 7-5 team. Now, of course, the Big Ten has 12 teams, so they get a conference championship game, whereas the Big 12 has 10 teams because that's how we like to do it in college football. And TCU and Baylor both suffered heavily, mightily. I think this was the difference between putting them in and keeping them out, was they didn't have the opportunity to have another top-ranked opponent and potentially win on their schedule like Ohio State did. And if you look at the rest of the schedule, Ohio State's opponent's record was 84-60, compared to that of Baylor of 61-70. So contrary to the Big 12's beliefs, as well as the entire state of Texas, the College Football Playoff Committee, they got the 4 teams right. So congratulations. Now, we've been worrying about who's going to be in all season, but now we know. We know what 4 teams. So who the heck's going to win? Well, 2 January 1st New Year's Day games of Alabama, Ohio State, and Oregon, Florida State will decide who meets in the national championship. And for me, Alabama, Ohio State, it's got to be Alabama. I just think despite Urban Meyer and the magic that has been the quarterback position for the Buckeyes this year, you have to go with Nick Saban, Blake Sims, and the Heisman Trophy candidate, Amari Cooper, book them a spot in the national championship game. Now, who will they play? Florida State, last year's winner, the undefeated Seminoles, or the Ducks of Oregon, led by this year's likely winner, Marcus Mariota. Now, we talked about this earlier, but Mariota has 2 picks on the year. Winston, last year's Heisman Trophy winner, has 17. And those two are likely both top 5 picks in the draft coming up in the spring. Now, I don't have any research or statistical backup for this statement, but I think the Seminoles will force Mariota in turnovers, and Winston will actually take care of the ball. And once again, the Florida State Seminoles will win and advance to play the Alabama Crimson Tide in the championship game. Florida State squeaked by many opponents, winning by 3.5 points per game over their last 4. In those 4 games, they didn't exactly play anybody outside of Georgia Tech. That should have put fear in their hearts. Bama? They're the number 1 team in the country, and deservedly so. But there's just this thing for me. We talked about it. It's called winning. And Jameis Winston, Jimbo Fisher, and Florida State continuously do it over and over for the last 2 years. And until they don't do it anymore, they are the favorites for me in any game they play. And so yes, back-to-back years, the Florida State Seminoles will be NCAA National Football Champions. Alright, that's it for this week's show. I appreciate you tuning in. I appreciate you watching. Christmas season is coming up, so have a good one.